Welcome to the OK, Let's Learn podcast. This is two family-friendly podcasts in one where we dive into tons of interesting books and stories, and another where we just dive into tons of interesting topics. My name is Kevin O'Keefe. So today, let's learn all about the classic picture book, Goodnight Moon, by Margaret Wise Brown, and pictures and illustrated by Clement Hurd. Yes, if you're talking classic picture books, I know, a shout out to my previous episode on the engine that could, but I'm sorry. I'm going to tell you up front, I'm giving it a rating from 1 to 10. I'm going to give it a 9. Why? Because it's so iconic. It's been around forever, for generations to generations. It is the one book that needs to be on every kid's bookshelf when you're first starting as a little toddler. My granddaughter Hazel, she just turned 2. This is her favorite book. And I was talking to my son last night. Yeah, he said, Dad, just in the past few months, I've read this book 50 times. And yes, she's only 2. She's loved books, and I've talked about this all the time here in some of my earlier episodes, but she is turning the pages, and she's now saying almost verbatim every word on the page. She gets it. And it's just, hey, listen, we're going to dive into everything. We're going to talk about the author, Margaret Wise Brown, her life, and as an adult, it is just really fun to kind of look back and comment and just notice so many different things about this book. And of course, I've revisited it through the years, but the famous line, good night stars, good night air, good night noises everywhere. I mean, I would argue people around the world, so many kids went to bed with this book. And one other point right up front before we dive into everything, it's your typical situation with your kids. They're right from the beginning of the book. It's bright. All the colors are bright, and it's a kid that's awake and it's not even close to going to bed, and you just got to wind down. And yeah, they finally wind down, and the last few pages of the books are just so, the room is a lot darker, and you're finally ready to go to bed. What a classic book. Now, first, I will say this. In my previous episode about the little engine that could, again, this is going to be so many different episodes on picture books, but I mentioned 5 million copies. The estimates are really varied all over the place. I really can't get a good handle on it, but you're no doubt this one is approaching Goodnight Moon through the generations. As of 2017, they estimated almost 50 million copies sold. Just imagine that, right? And they had said 5 million for the little engine that could. That's really probably more approaching 20 million. But Margaret Wise Brown, she wrote over 100 children's books, and this one was published in 1947. And what a prolific, amazing life that she had. But sadly, she passed away at such a young age. She was actually engaged to be married to one of the Rockefellers. He was actually the great grandnephew of John D. Rockefeller that started Standard Oil. And she was only 42 when she passed away. Now, up front, I'm sorry to give this sad news, but here's what happened. This is such a long time ago. It was 1952, 10 years before I was born. She had a ruptured appendix, and she went in for some emergency surgery. And believe it or not, she came out of the surgery, and she felt so good 2 days after the surgery that she was talking to the nurses, and she kicked her leg up really high into the air to show how great she was feeling. Well, apparently that dislodged a blood clot, and she ended up passing away suddenly. And I guess my point about this is that because this was so long ago, healthcare and hospital care is no way you can compare it to today. You never know what's going to happen in life. But for such a famous author, for this to happen to her is just so sad, especially being engaged. Now, Goodnight Moon. Now, here's the part about this up front. Such a classic book. It's so short, right? Again, for such a young audience. But in one sentence, here's the entire story. A little bunny is preparing to go to sleep, and he looks around his room, and he gradually says goodnight to everything he sees. And again, you can see this through the point of view of a young child. We can all go back to those memories. Sometimes when we're laying in bed as adults, we think about this and our mind wanders. But from a point of view and a window into the mind of someone so young, yes, you're saying goodnight to everything around you. And again, the foundation being so much of love and feeling comfortable and feeling secure about going off and going to sleep. And really, this is the brilliance of Margaret Wise Brown. She understood something about very young children that wasn't obvious to other authors that wrote about kids or to kids. Young children don't always need an adventure. Sometimes they just want what's safe and what's familiar. They want, yes, absolutely repetition. That's why Dr. Seuss became so famous. And they want to be able to feel good and recognize things, right? Just think of the wonder when I see Hazel and she's talking about different things that she's now communicating and she's understanding. This is the world of a child. And really, most importantly, kids want the world immediately around them to feel important. That's the idea that became central to Margaret Weis's career. And her story, it begins on May 23rd, 1910. She was born in Brooklyn, New York. The woman who wrote a book that feels so completely natural to us today was born in 1910. She grew up with a comfortable life early on. She was raised in Long Island. Her father was an executive. And so, yeah, she was athletic. She was independent. And she really was not particularly interested. And again, you have to remember, growing up at this time, women, right, they weren't really necessarily expected always to go out and lead an independent life. Well, she did that. She loved animals, she rode horses, she hunted, she fished, and later in life, she actually was very proficient at driving fast cars, and she traveled a lot. But becoming a children's book writer, that wasn't her childhood dream, and nothing really pointed towards that in terms of her early life. She attended Hollins College in Virginia, and she graduated in 1932. And again, from my younger members of the audience, you have to remember this long ago, most women did not go to college. But coming out of college, she did show an interest in writing, but she wasn't a kid's author right away. She was interested in writing for adults, but it didn't go very well. Publishers weren't especially interested in her short stories that she wrote. So she encountered something that would really change her life and ultimately lead her to kids' books. In New York, she became involved with an experimental school that was connected with what was called the Bureau of Educational Experiments, which eventually became today's Bank Street College of Education, a very famous organization that really advocates for kids' literature. She came under the influence of this educator, Lucy Sprague Mitchell. Mitchell believed that children's books didn't always need to be filled with fairy tales, faraway kingdoms, and, big-time adventures. Why couldn't books just be about things that kids actually encountered? Simple things, a train, a dog, anything, right? A spoon. the sounds children heard and the objects they noticed every day. It became known as the here and now approach to children's literature. Yes, this became a think tank almost, right? So Brown joined this Bank Street Writers Laboratory in 1937, where writers studied children closely, how they spoke, what interested them, what they noticed, and how they responded to stories, most importantly. Brown discovered that she had an extraordinary ear for the language of really young kids. She once described herself as waking up in the morning with her head full of stories. Soon, those stories were pouring out of her. Her first published children's book, When the Wind Blew, was published in 1937. And then the books just kept coming. Her career lasted only about 15 years, as I mentioned, passing away so young. But she wrote over 100 books, stories, songs, lots of other materials. She was so productive that she sometimes used pen names because she didn't want the publishing market overwhelmed with books just from her. Among her best-selling books, you've heard of this one, definitely had this one in our house, a little board book, I remember it distinctly, The Runaway Bunny. That was published in 1942. There was other books called The Little Islands. There was the Golden Egg book, the Sailor Dog, the Color Kittens, and ones that I particularly remember was the Important Book, Red Light, Green Light, and the Noisy Book. She did have a sequel to Goodnight Moon. It was called My World. And then later on, the publisher put together a compilation 3-book series that can get confusing. It's called Over the Moon. And that included her famous book, The Runaway Bunny, and obviously the 2 books here, Goodnight Moon and My World. And finally, listen to this. This was just about 20 years ago. They had found manuscripts. They called this the Lost Manuscripts. And it was in a cedar trunk in her Vermont barn that she had, I guess where she did a lot of her writing. But these were found shortly after she passed away, and they were reissued in another story that had moon in the title. It was called The Moon Shines Down. And it was another type of book with a lot of kids and animal observations. So let's now do some commentary on the book. Hey, I'm going to throw out a lot of my observations as I reread this after so many years, obviously, right? And so many little Easter eggs in here, so many things we can comment on and question and wonder about. So no ifs, ands, or buts. Stop the podcast here. Go out and get this book. And you know what? For most families with young kids, just go find it on the bookshelf. So first thing that I absolutely positively notice, and that again is the wonder for a child, is all these little objects in the room. They stay in the room. And yes, as you get older, you can kind of almost go on a scavenger hunt to kind of notice differences and what's written there. And the first thing right away that I notice is, first of all, you can tell the time and the setting of the story just with the phone. Clearly, what do we got? A fireplace. Why do we have a fireplace in a kid's home? But again, you're talking about rural communities, homes out in the countryside, and that's how you heated your homes in a lot of respects. And right away, I picked up with the 3 little bears, and which clearly is porridge on the table, but they referenced it as being mush, which is just great. If you look carefully, you can see the little mouse, and of course you have the frame with the cow jumping over the moon that's referenced big time as you go along. And again, another Easter egg in the little frame. It's like a story within a story. The frame in the 3 little bears picture has got the cow jumping over the moon there as well. You've got the Runaway Bunny book on a shelf. You've got the actual book Goodnight Moon on the dresser. And what's interesting, when I did a little research on this, all these little Easter eggs and nuggets, this was mostly the work of the illustrator, Clement Hurd. And now he collaborated a lot with Margaret Wise Brown. It really wasn't her doing. She just kind of wrote the story. So talk about a great collaboration. And here's another thing that, again, if as you get older, you get this. But what's up with the curtain rod? Number one, it's an arrow. And again, as I did some research, the color of the arrow changes as you go along. And wait a minute, like, seriously, what's going on with the curtain rod on the other side? Why is it not sticking out? That just doesn't seem logical. And, again, doing research on this, these are some of the anomalies that, maybe at the time when they published this book and they illustrated it, they didn't think it was going to sell 50 million copies. So there was some things that were clearly overlooked. But I love the technique that the author uses in terms of, and again, this could have been the illustrator, going from color to black and white, color to black and white. And no doubt, I referenced this earlier, you've got the light colors in the beginning. The lights are on, and then everything gets darker as you go off to bed. And there's a time sequence. Again, I actually had to get out a magnifying glass, but to see the time on the little clock on the bedstand, it starts at 7 o'clock, and then the lights are not, they're not out, and he's not asleep until it looks like almost 8:10, so an hour and 10 minutes to get the bunny to go to sleep. Now, how about the old lady who says hush? Number one, hush. So typical of something that you would think that caregivers or grandparents would say in the 40s. And initially you're saying, well, who is this, right? Is it a mother? Is it a grandmother? And with doing some research, no, it's just a caregiver. Apparently there is a family in the sequel, but, this is somebody that's looking over and helping out the family to get the little bunny to go to sleep. But, just the fact that she says hush, I just think is funny. And the rhyming, right? The rhyming is perfect for the little kids. Bears and chairs and kittens and mittens and room and moon. You talk about developmentally early on being able to read. And in this case, it's easy to kind of memorize the lines because it just goes and flows so easily. I mean, look what I just did. I just rhymed. Also love the fact that you can follow the mouse and where it moves from page to page. And the best one, of course, is moving over to that porridge, but ultimately it ends up on the ledge. So to wrap up, let's go through some quick awards. And I will say this, another aspect that makes it so memorable and really, really works for young kids is two pieces that go together. Think about it. The details in the drawings, the consistency in the drawings, yet the simplicity in the narrative, right? And really, overall, being so short. And it does have an arc, right? And it's all about going to sleep. And it's all about, like I mentioned before, just comfort and love and this ritual that kids go through every night that's so, so important. Best moment in the picture book. I got to go with the last one. The last page, right? Good night noises everywhere. Hey, at this point, if you're a kid, you may be sleeping. And if you're an adult, you're a parent, you're like, okay, everything should be quiet now. So we're going to go out to sleep. And hopefully this book did its job. And you can just quietly leave. But I'll give the Best Illustration Award to this page as well. I love the night sky that still is the only thing bright in the room, and that the little picture of the mouse just sitting there on the windowsill. I just think that's just so perfect. Best observation that you have to almost see, and in my case, I just picked it up finally like the 10th time going through the book, is obviously now the moon. The moon moving over the course of the hour and 10, 15 minutes, right? It started out bottom left-hand corner of the window, and by the time you're going to sleep, it's right there almost in the top right-hand corner. Best Easter egg? It's got to be the copy of the book Goodnight Moon on the dresser. It's just like it's this infinite loop, right? And I think it's one of the first things you notice. And how about this runner-up observation? I'm sorry, I looked into this too much. The comb on the table next to the bed, that's right next to the hairbrush that says bunny on it, they keep moving. They're really close together. At one point, they're touching, and then another sequence, another page, they're kind of far apart. I don't think it's the mouse that's moving it, but again, obviously another quirk that you're looking too much into this, and there's no doubt that the author didn't do that. The illustrator didn't do that intentionally. Funniest page, funniest moment is no doubt, and good night to the old lady whispering hush that ultimately rhymed with mush. And if you want to say the worst moment of the book, you can't say worst moment with a Goodnight Moon, but just maybe most unnecessary page or moment when it says good night nobody. I mean, we got nothing on that page. Just it seemed out of place, but again, it works. So finally, to wrap up the podcast here on Goodnight Moon, I have to do a shout out. I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but listen to this. I just think it's so amazing. I've always, through the years, in all the picture books, I have the kids, my students, write a rating out of 5 stars. And they write their name. It's in the inside cover of every book. And I guess because, we're in 2nd grade, no, we can't read Goodnight Moon in 2nd grade. I only had 3 students, but a big shout out to these students. Listen to the first 2 names. Of course, they rhyme. Savannah and Havana. Different years. And then, finally, we had Zach. All wonderful students, all wonderful kids, and they're not kids anymore. So a big shout out to all 3 of you. And I tell you, it just, especially with Havana and Savannah, in Goodnight Moon, rhyming, it's just so wonderful. And they all gave it great ratings. So friends, thanks for taking this journey, learning all about the classic book, Goodnight Moon. Reach out to me at our new email address, okletslearnpodcast@gmail.com. And yes, we have a website now. It's okletslearn.com. We are on Facebook. We are on Spotify. We are on YouTube. We are on Substack. Any podcast platform that's out there, we are there. Just Google OK Let's Learn, and you can find it. You can listen on your iPhone. You can listen on your tablet. You can listen on your computer. Hey, love the reviews, love the ratings. And finally, if you're so inclined, if you'd like to support the podcast, look for the link in the show notes that says support the show on patreon.com. You can be named as a producer, inaugural producer, and mention your name on every episode going forward. So until next time, have fun and keep learning.